All right, here we go. Brennan Savage, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, very good, Brett. How about you?
I'm good, mate. It's great to catch up. For those that don't know the history of you and I, tell us kind of what you used to do and how we kind of first got in contact with each other.
Well, I worked in swimming when I was working with you, Brett, obviously, and that was a long time ago now, during
Mm,
your career.
mm.
And my role at that stage was I was a sports scientist, and my background is physiology. But I think by the time I was working in and around the squads that you were with, so with Popey, and I was a bit more of a generalist in terms of the science. I was combining physiology and I suppose crudely biomechanics, stroke efficiency, and technique sort of work. So looking at really trying to assist the coaches to get the very best out of their athletes and to help you guys and girls as athletes to understand better the link between your efficiency and your speed and how that was going to ultimately end up in better performance.
Yeah, I always felt like Australia were kind of on the cutting edge of that, and you were at the forefront of leading that. Was I wrong in that assessment?
I don't think so. I think everyone was doing something, along those lines in different ways. I think, you know, I think I certainly don't consider myself to be contemporary in that space now. I've been out
Yeah,
of sports
yeah,
science and out of swimming for the best part of 10 years now. So, but certainly at the time we were trying things differently. We were trying to use, race analysis was becoming more prevalent, and we were certainly on the forefront of leading how methodically and how strategically we were using race analysis both during competition and then trying to then say, okay, well, it's great during competition, but how can we use that on a daily basis? And I suppose that's where I felt like we were leading in terms of bringing the race analysis to the training environment and going, okay, well, what's what's this telling us about how we need to race and how we need to train to prepare to race,
right.
and make sure that that's then. So when you get to the race situation, you're not trying to do something you haven't thought about or been aware of all the way through your training. So instead of just going up and down hard and fast, there's actually some basis to it and some other parameters you're looking to try and maximize, other than just how fast you get from one end of the pool to the other. It's
Yeah.
how are you actually doing that? Your stroke length, your rating, your efficiency, your splits through it. So that was sort of where I think we were, not just myself, but certainly the people that were working in swimming at that time were really trying to understand better and push the boundaries. And we had some really really open coaches to that. You were with one with Popey, with Ian Pope, and Rowan
Mm,
Taylor was another one who was really open to that
mm.
sort of thinking, and they were the coaches that I worked with quite closely there in Victoria.
Yeah, well, that was it. And so to give people context, I moved to Victorian swimming from New South Wales swimming. New South Wales was my home state. I grew up in Sydney. I came back from America in 1999, and I started swimming. I trained in Sydney for the Sydney Olympics, and then I spent a few more seasons there training for the World Championships and other events, and kind of traveled the world. And then made the decision in 2003 to move down to Ian Pope in Victoria, and that was kind of where you were based, more in Victorian swimming at that point in time, and that's where I really had much more of a connection with you and hands-on connection, where it felt very high performance in terms of like Victorian swimming and the Victorian Institute of Sport at the time seemed to be investing in athletics, investing in you as kind of the leader in that, and kind of almost giving you free reign to say, hey, go with this program where you feel like you want to go and get the results you want to get. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. And I reflect now on where I am now in my career as a performance director, and I think I think fondly back on my time at the VIS because
Mm,
I was working in when I moved to Victoria. I was at SASI in South Australia for 6 years, and I had the opportunity to work there with great coach and great program, Glenn Berringen and Ryan Mitchell, Phil Rogers, Helen Denman, those breaststroke crew that came through, and through from '96 through to Sydney in 2000. And when I moved to Victoria in 2002, it was in a program manager's role. So I was had the opportunity to really combine leading a program strategically, but also being hands-on with the coaches and the athletes from a science and from a support perspective. So I got a
mm,
little bit of best of both worlds. And that provided, I think, a really good foundation for the way the program could be run. Because, and to your point, really thinking about, well, everything is driven by how do we get the best out of our, out of the athletes and the coaches. So it's really truly a high performance environment. So around the 2 or 3 programs that we had that were delivering athletes, and we had obviously Ian's program and you moved down to that, and there was a few other high quality athletes that were there as well. We had Rowan, we had Glenn Baker and Andrew Lauderstein, who was making his entry into swimming at that point in time as well. So the opportunity to work with a young developing kid who turned into being an Olympic medalist. So it was a really, really great time in my career, and I think fondly back on the time and the athletes that I got the opportunity, the privilege to work with, you being one of those, and ultimately taking those athletes through to Athens.
Yeah.
And then having the opportunity then to extend that work to a national team perspective by being also on national team and moving towards having a strategic leadership role for swimming in Australia, which I moved to in 2007.
Yeah.
When I was employed by Swimming Australia.
Yeah, I mean, you moved on to bigger positions, but at that time, from memory, and I think back on it, like you were kind of all in on this. It was like you would go and travel with us, and I mean, this is a lifestyle commitment too. This isn't just a job where you're clocking in at 9 o'clock in the morning and clocking out at 5 o'clock. Like you're in this as a lifestyle as well, and the lifestyle itself is very demanding in terms of like you've got to be available for anything and everything, and that meant for you like traveling to certain destinations with us and being at certain workouts and doing all that sort of stuff. So it's like it was almost like I don't think you had a life at that stage. You were just living.
I was certainly fully invested. I was fully invested, but I at no point do I have any regrets or feel like I've missed out on anything that I could have been doing other than what I was doing. And look, it was a time commitment. If I was, I was on pool deck most mornings and most afternoons at different locations. So up super early, and then but I still managed to fit in all the training that I wanted to do. I still managed to fit in, having good friendships and good, what I thought was a really good time, and enjoying Melbourne for what Melbourne was back in those days. So, but I think if you want to be able to, the way I take up all my roles, and it's even now as a performance director, is that if the ones who you're ultimately trying to support and facilitate an outcome for, which is the athletes or players, then they have to, if you're going to ask them to invest in what they need to do to be high performance, then I feel like you have a responsibility to demonstrate to them that you're invested in them as well. So you need to be there at training, showing that you care about them and you care about what they're doing, so that when you ask them to do something, they trust it's coming from the right place.
Right.
So that's what I was doing with you guys, was being there on pool deck, so that I wasn't just some Johnny come lately, turn up every 2 weeks and start telling you what you should be doing technically. It's like, no, this guy, he actually watches us train. He talks to our coach all the time. He talks to us all the time. He knows us. We trust him. So you're prepared to explore opportunities and explore different ways of thinking, if that's what's required to try and find a way to go faster.
Yeah, and what I appreciated about you at the time, which I probably haven't even told you, is, and maybe I didn't appreciate it enough where I haven't told you, whereas I wasn't aware of it, but looking back on it, is like you presented us with the quality of the work ethic that you had, but you presented us with the information and you gave it to us in a way that allowed us to make decisions on it. It wasn't like you were, hey, this is what I've seen, this is what I'm doing. You weren't forcing it down our throats in terms of like, it was kind of like, here's the work I've done, I'm going to present it, and I can talk you through it, but you do what you want with it, kind of thing, and everybody was a bit different. Some people were really into the science and the numbers and wanted to know the details, and other people like me, in a way, were kind of like, okay, great, I've seen it, I'm going to move on and go over here and do this now, because I've appreciated it. So I always appreciated that you just presented it and people could take it how they wanted to take it,
Yeah, I think that's a look. At the end of the day, Brett, in that context, it's your career. So I can present you with information that I feel and I want to talk to you about that I think is going to help you. But I can't make you do something if you don't believe in it. So my job is all the way through it has been to present information, to present data, to talk to you and the coach about what might make the improvement. And then if there's a collective agreement on the fact that we're going to go forward with that, then we're all committed and invested in it. But if you try and bring an athlete along a journey with something that they're not really invested in, then it's not going to work. And then they get a chance to self-validate by saying, well, I told you it wouldn't work, when they haven't actually been invested in it. So there's no use trying to make someone do something that they don't really believe in. So it's incumbent upon the support staff and the coach, if the coach believes in it as well, to bring the athlete on a journey about believing it's going to actually make a difference. So that's what I did. And there were times where, there were times we tried things and they didn't sort of work out the way we thought, but we were prepared to acknowledge and accept that and then move on to what we thought would work. So,
I always appreciate your work ethic. And one of the things when I transitioned into coaching, what I wanted my athletes to understand was that I was as invested in them as they were in themselves. I wanted them to feel like it was a partnership. And I always felt that from you. It was genuine. It wasn't something that you were manufacturing. It wasn't something that you were faking. Like, I remember waking up one day and coming down to breakfast and saying, "Hey, how you doing, man?" And you were like, good, you know. But I realized at that point that you'd been up all night working on analysis, you know, like literally all night. And here you are at breakfast, and you're putting on a brave face, and you're showing that. I'm thinking to myself, oh, this guy's got 8 hours sleep, and here you are. I realized that you've been up all night working for us, and when you have that kind of buy-in and commitment from someone, there's no way that you can't reciprocate that back. It's like, dude, this guy is going to bust his ass for me and stay up all night just to analyze my races, and then in the morning present it to me at breakfast. I'm like, that's the guy I want to die for, you know? So it's like, I always felt that from you, you know?
Yeah, it comes back down to what we talked about before, but about it being invested in what you're doing and invested in the people you're working for. And, that's part of that, building that trust and building that connection with the athlete group or player group. Now working as I am in a team sport, that they feel like the people around them are as invested in what they're doing as they are. I think that's really important in fostering that commitment and that relationship and that opportunity then to have the right conversations at the right time.
Yeah. Let's go into the details of it then. What were you doing all night? I never really asked you. I mean, I saw the outcome of like the transcript.
Well, look, as I said, I know that now that swimming technology's come so far, since those days. So it's far more automated now, and I would suggest probably a whole lot more potentially accurate than what we were doing, particularly in those days. But it was quite a laboursome and time-consuming task to analyse the races in terms of breaking it down into segments and calculating velocities across the sections of the race that you broke down. So in your specialty race, the 50, we would break that down into 10-metre segments and look at the velocity, the stroke rate, and distance per stroke in each of those segments. Also some underwater times and start time and finish time, etc. So because you needed to watch the race through and stop it and then move it we use the lane rope markers to give us distance markers. Then you'd need to make sure that you had the center of the head going through that marker. Things just took time to add up. And then, for me, it was really important that it was accurate. So I do it, and then I go back and I do it again to double check the numbers to make sure that I was giving, because particularly if you're going to be asking a coach and an athlete, but between maybe a heat and a semi-final, or between a semi-final and a final, to make some adjustments based on the data, then you've got to make sure it's right.
Yeah.
So double check it and then produce the report of that particular race, and then make a choice on what races you think are relevant in your history to compare it to.
Yeah.
So you pick your best performance, and then you'd pick maybe a relevant. If it was a heat swim, you'd pick a relevant heat swim to compare it to, because you sort of progress the way you swim the races through heat, semi-final, final. So produce those reports, and then it was a matter of, once that was all done, not just handing it back. So then I would look through them and have a think about well, what are my talking points that I want to highlight for
Mm.
the coach and athlete? So what are the comments I want to make, and how am I going to present that? So as
Yeah.
well as knowing on the video, well, there's a point here at between 25 and 35. So I meant to make sure I've got the video available to go there, and we can talk about it, but then watch it, because, you know, I'm sure you would agree that the most powerful images are the ones that you can see on video, about connecting with what the data is telling you with what you can actually see on the video.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, like going back to that point of like, I always appreciated the fact that you allowed me to then turn that into some sort of psychological component. Like, you know, it's one thing to analyze the numbers and look at the science, but then it's also another thing to say, well, what the fuck am I going to do about it? You know what I mean? It's like, you got to do something about it. And at that point, as an athlete, you've got a couple of hours to analyze the data and say, well, how can I make a change here? And generally, what I found for me personally, it came down to some sort of psychological component that I had to figure out of like, okay, where am I going to make an adjustment here, and how am I going to factor that into my head? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's particularly with a race like the 50, it can all be about, you know, your psychological arousal, where you are. Like, if you overswim the first 15 meters, it might be because you're too wound up. But it's a very fine line, isn't it? You don't want to be under aroused, because then you underswim the first 15 and the race is gone from you.
Yep.
So yeah, there's definitely psychology, you know, because you don't just sort of go, okay, I'm going to fix that and do it. So it's about being mindful about, what do I need to be doing, what I need to be thinking about a point in the race, you know. So if it's a 200-meter swimmer, it's often the third 50 where things fall away, you know. So it's okay, well, you know, second 50 into third 50. So what do we need to change at that point in time, but what are we going to be thinking about? How are we going to be approaching the, you know, 170, 75 to 100, and then 100 to 125. What's our tactics in that point in time, and where's our mind need to be? And, you know, across the time, I've become really acutely aware of the power of mindset, and where your attention is, and where your focus is in the moment, to bring performance, and how easy it is for our minds just to drift off into somewhere else.
Right.
And that ultimately takes away from performance. And it might be drifting away to thinking about the outcome, or drifting away to thinking about, you know, what I can or can't do, as opposed to staying in the moment, staying focused, and executing whatever skill it is that you're involved in right then and there.
Yeah. Now there was a moment that was very significant in changing the outcome of an event, and my memory's slightly fuzzy on it, but I think you're involved. Were you at the 2009 World Championships?
I was, yeah.
Okay, so I'm almost 100% sure it was you, from memory, and I'm not the best in terms of memory. So, but I get the impression that between the semifinal and the final of the 100 freestyle, when Caesar ended up breaking the world record in the 100 freestyle, I get the impression in my memory that you handed me a piece of paper and said, "I'm not supposed to hand you this, but I want you to have this." And and I gladly took it, but I think you handed me a piece of paper that basically just gave me the breakdown of analysis that you did. You didn't give me any advice. You didn't break it down for me. You just basically handed me a piece of paper. And what I knew from that piece of paper is how to read it, because of the years that I've had with you. And as a coach at that point in time, I got to tell you, was absolutely crucial in order for us to adjust the outcome of what Caesar was doing and how he was approaching the race. And so basically you said to me, like, you need to take a look at this. And I looked at it, and I looked at it fairly deeply. And what I found is, again, I talked to Caesar about this, by the way. So I looked at the analysis and I took it to Caesar and I said, hey, here's how we can win. Here's how we can break the world record. And so what I saw from the analysis was that Alan Bernard had rated up fairly highly, and Caesar's rate was fairly low. He was on the back end of the kind of the stroke rate and the stroke length. And what I said to Caesar, I said, look, if you put a little bit of pressure on this thing at the front end, and you maintain at the back end, I think you can win this thing. I think you can break the world record. And it all came from this analysis that you gave me. Again, it was very secretive at the time, but look, it made the difference. And things like that, like the little adjustments that you can make a world of difference. And Caesar ended up doing exactly. Caesar had a magical way of doing exactly what you told him to do. He just had that skill, and basically was like, I want you to take 2 extra strokes. So he was out on, I think he was out in 31 strokes the first 50 in the semifinal. I said, I want you to be out in 33. I said, Alan is out in 38. So he's rating up higher. He's going to be catching less water. But if you rate up just a little bit more and you get out a little bit faster, I guarantee you're going to put pressure on him, and he's going to scramble, and you're going to be able to maintain your length, and you're going to break the world record. And I'm telling you, it worked to the T. That's exactly how it happened. So I do have to thank you for that, I believe.
Yeah. My memory of that is, and look, it's a long time ago now, isn't it, Brett? But that my memory is we didn't have anyone in that final. So I think, from that perspective, then it's like, well, obviously got a really good relationship with you. Always was interested in helping you, and came and visited you in Auburn a couple of times, and keeping you across any changes in our pace charts that we were making, and updating you on that. So I thought, okay, well, look, I'll just give Brett this, because we were always analysing our competitor swimmers. So I would video all the other races regardless and do the analysis. So that was done for our databasing. But I think, okay, well, I'm going to hand that over, and because similar sort of observations. But again, as you said, it's not my job then. It's like, well, you're the coach now, so I'll give you the data. You interpret it. So, but yeah, well, that's a great outcome then.
No, look, it was one of those situations where it was like, man, thank God for that, because it made us make a few adjustments. And I think you hear that like in the Super Bowl, like or a football game in the NFL. Like in football, they'll go in at halftime and the coaches will make adjustments, and they'll come out, and that's kind of what it was. It was a halftime adjustment for us, and it ended up paying dividends. And look, you got to have the right athlete to be able to do that, to make that adjustment, who can do what you tell them to do, and that was Caesar for sure. But yeah, it was one of those situations where I was just thankful for the relationship that we had, Now,
wasn't that a crazy meet, Brett? That 2009 World Championships,
2009 World Champs was just nuts. I mean, it was a perfect setting. First of all, it was in Rome in summer.
Lovely.
Pool. And then you have these super suits that everyone's wearing. It was just like a recipe for fast swimming, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, thinking back on that now, is that, for the athletes that were wearing them and were being successful, it was, and the coach and the athlete really understanding and swimming with and to the potential of the suits, but not overplaying them. So a bit like you're talking about, like Elaine, maybe overrating because he just felt so high and so good in the water, and so there was a little bit of the adaptability and the ability to understand what was going on to the success of those athletes at that time. But some unbelievable times swum.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do want to transition into kind of where you went from that. So in terms of Victorian swimming, Australian swimming pick you up as a leader. You start to work for Australian Swimming Australia, whatever it was called at the time, and then you move on. So how did you transition out, and what was that transition for you?
I left swimming and moved on from Swimming Australia after the London Olympics, and I went to triathlon, and I took on a performance director role. So, I think at the time there was a whole lot of things that were going on in swimming around London and the performances there, and a lot of it probably external opinion that wasn't necessarily correct in my view, and there was lots of things internally that did go wrong that needed to be looked at and reviewed. So it just gave me a real sense that it was maybe time for me, if I wanted to sort of explore leadership more and explore what my career might be, for me to step away and not be pigeonholed as just a swimming guy and just a scientist. And so I got approached about applying for this role, and I thought, yep, okay, I'll have a look at it, and was successful. And my last meet with swimming was the world short course in Istanbul in 2012. So, and I started with triathlon then. So, I'm really grateful that I did it. I have absolutely no regrets. I've discovered so much more about working in different sports, working with different athletes and coaches, and about leadership on the journey I've been in the last 10 or so years. So really, really enjoyed it. It's been an absolute blast, and I've learned an incredible amount it's hard to say that I may not have learned that if I had stayed where I was, but I just feel like the perspectives you get from stepping away and doing a whole bunch of different things, and working with different people and seeing different sports. I've worked through triathlon, through rowing, and now I'm with hockey. So you sort of got this migration from two individual sports in swimming and triathlon to rowing, where you've got teams within a team. So you've got crews within a larger team, and now to a truly team sport. So it's been a really good journey.
Yeah. What are they looking for? What's triathlon and rowing and hockey? That's the dog back there. Sorry about that.
Right. My puppy's floating around here too.
What are they looking for in terms of leadership, and what are the things that correlate and connect with all four of those things?
Look, I think in terms of leadership, it's really about what's needed in the program at the point in time. So, I think back to triathlon, and once you're in a PD role, you've got a greater responsibility for the strategic direction of the program. And triathlon was interesting because it was really, you got a lot there. It's a very individual sport.
Yeah.
Those athletes exist and train by themselves. I had the opportunity to work with a coach at triathlon that really did invest and buy into the idea of a group training together to maintain daily performance standards. And I think, that was where a lot of success came from for his group. In particular, he coached Jamie Turner. He coached Gwen Jorgensen, and she won the gold medal in Rio. She was competed for the USA.
Right.
But it was the environment that he created around those athletes that Gwen invested in, because she believed in this environment that was going to challenge her on a daily basis to be the very best. So, so that in that sport in particular, they're looking for, I suppose, you to lead by providing each of the coaching pods or athlete groups the opportunity to do what they felt was right for them. And how do you manage that and move that around and bring them together when you need to, and let them go off and do their own thing. Which is a little bit like what swimming was back in the day, when we were working, when I was with swimming and you were an athlete, was that you had lots of diverse coaching groups. Like at different times, we could have anywhere up to 15, 16, 17 different coaching programs that would put athletes onto the national team. So rowing was when I started with rowing after the Rio Olympics, the sport had made a decision to centralise their senior program. So all the males came into one location in Canberra.
Oh, okay.
And all the girls, all the females went to a new training centre that we were building in Penrith, on Penrith on the Nepean River.
Okay.
And close to, a couple of kilometres away from the Sydney 2000 Olympic rowing or Olympic Regatta Centre, where they held the rowing and the flatwater kayak. So that was really different, because you were then leading two programs that were centralised. So that was about, you've got athletes in a DTE on a daily basis, preparing and training to ultimately move into crews and ultimately move on to, to the World Championships and then the games. So that was a really steep learning curve for me in managing the dynamics of a centralized environment where you had lots of athletes, so 25 men together with 25 women, 3 coaches, and a large beast of a program in terms of what you needed to move around the world and what you needed to do. So
wow,
that was really about, again, all my journey through leadership has been about how do I, even though I'm technically getting further away from the athletes or the coalface, how do I make sure I'm remaining connected with them so that I get a feel and understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
And now at Hawke, it's I mean both well, our men's program is still centralised here in Perth. We've had to make some changes to our structure around our women's program because we received a significant funding cut off the back of Tokyo for the women. So that's been a really interesting challenge from a leadership perspective in terms of bringing the female athletes and the staff around that program on a journey about, understanding our resource limitations, but really believing we can still do something special, even though we're going to have to make these adjustments. So this is not about what we don't have. This is about the opportunity in front of us to really, be clear about what's important to us and be clear about what's going to improve performance and be clear about the importance of the culture in the group and around the group and what that leads to in terms of performance. And I think the team did a fantastic job last year. They went from a disappointing Tokyo Olympics to essentially having the RAS tell them that they don't have any belief in their ability to medal in Paris, to going to a World Cup last year and getting a bronze medal. So, I think they're on a really good journey. So, really excited about what we can do.
So, what's your position then now? What's the official title?
I'm the high performance director for Hawke Australia.
Okay, so in terms of hierarchy, high performance director sits where in the hierarchy?
So I report directly to the CEO of the organisation. So essentially, the performance director role is essentially like the CEO of the high performance unit, I suppose. We have 2 head coaches for the men's and women's program that report into me. So I'm directly managing those 2 head coaches and then those 2 programs through them. So
the men's program is situated where and the women's are where?
So the men are situated in Perth, where Hawke has been for years, for a long time, and the women were centralised here. We have had to decentralise that now. However, there are still a large group of the females that have got their lives set up over here in Perth, so we'll still run a DTE, but we will have athletes in the squad that will train in their home environment. So we'll have some girls that are in Queensland, for example, training over there. And we need to find the opportunity to get them in together to prepare for targeted tournaments and competition periods.
I do have to be specific. I apologize because I'm in North America, where when they say hockey, they mean ice hockey. So
yes,
I found that it's a totally different thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, the USA women are in pro league this year, so we're playing against them soon. So in field hockey.
So
yeah,
so
I think
how many? I mean, I guess it's hard to put a number on it, but how many countries compete in field hockey?
Based at the recent World Cup, for example, there were 16 teams in the tournament, 4 pools of 4, and there are probably a number of teams below that haven't qualified. So you're probably looking at sort of circa 30, or there's a large number of member nations of FIH. It's just a matter of understanding what level of hockey they have that they're playing in each of their countries. So Europe is the major power base, and then you've got then obviously North America, and then there's the South American teams. Argentina, in particular, on both sides is quite strong, and Chile. We're at the World Cup, and then obviously in Oceania you've got Australia and New Zealand, South Africa. So it's strong in the Commonwealth Games, and obviously it's also a key Olympic sport that's been in the program for a number of years.
Yeah. Is there competition between the men and the women on the hockey side? In Australia, or like, did they compete against each other?
Well, they don't play against each other.
I think, obviously, but like
certainly, look, I think maybe historically there was a bit of competition that might have gone on between the 2 programs, but since I've come in, I've tried to lead the program as the best for the program, and encourage connection between the two coaching groups in particular. So I think there's lots of things that come from talking to other coaches, not only in your own sport, but other sports as well, in terms of learnings and ideas and opportunities. So, and being very clear with the two playing groups that while, don't think that, just don't look over the fence and see another program doing something different and think that they've got something you haven't got.
Right.
Your program is structured to deliver the best for what you need. Trying to remove that idea of competition, I suppose, between the two programs, because you want both programs to be successful, and you want both programs to be happy when the other one is successful as well.
Right. You've dealt with individual superstars in the past, obviously with swimming and rowing and some other capacities. So, in terms of now moving into a team sport, how do you deal with the superstars, the people that kind of, the ones that are there, kind of, I wouldn't say carrying the team, but certainly maybe the face of the team, or certainly getting the results.
I think one of the things that's interesting coming into a team sport is that, you always see it when you watch team sports, is there's going to be someone who is considered to be the superstar, or the game player, or whatever it might be. But I think if they're in a team that is super successful, then my experience is that those players have a really good sense of that they're not actually bigger than the team.
Right.
And the perspective is that they always seem to bob up when the team needs them to perform. So it might be in the last the dying seconds of a match, and they do something super special and they get the team over the line. It's interesting that their approach to that is not about, well, I've got to do something, so get me the ball or get me whatever it is. It's about them saying, I'm playing my role for the team first, which means I need to make sure I'm in the right place. And if the opportunity comes along, then I need to be ready to execute. And they are. And they understand very clearly that while they may be technically better players, they're only as good as the rest of the team are. So what's their role in lifting the standard of the whole team? Because if they want to win, ultimately the team has to win. So it's a different mindset, because you have to exist in a team environment, and you have to have the trust of everyone in the team, and you have to trust everyone on the team as well. So that's the really interesting thing about working in a team sport now, is really getting the opportunity to work with those super cool environments where you've really got to build a really good culture and a strong understanding of the expectations, and the having the strength of trust that you can call someone out when they're not doing the right thing, and they accept it as, you're not talking to me because it's personal. You're talking to me because I haven't lived up to what are our agreed standards or our agreed expectations. And that can be the first year rookie calling the 10-year super experienced guy on something, if that's the agreed expectation of the team. I think that's really good to see. I think they're the cultures and the teams that are going to be successful. And
what about in your role in terms of high performance manager? You said it's kind of almost like a CEO role. So in terms of you and the head coach, how do you interact? How does he or she say, yeah, you're the decision maker on this aspect, and I'm going to back you on that? And then when do you say, hey, that's your decision, kind of thing? So like, how do those roles interface?
Yes, the way I take up the role, or my role as the performance director, is my job is to make sure the coach can do all they need to do to have their attention on what they need to do to make the team better.
Right.
So I would talk with them on a daily basis. I go to training almost every day to watch and talk to the athletes and observe. I'm very clear with them that I'm not a technical guy. I'm not a hockey guy. not a hockey coach. I don't come from field hockey. So I'm learning about the game, and I'm learning about the tactics and the structures and all those things and all that, which is great. But my role is to support them to do what they need to do to drive the team forward. So the decision-making process is that if there's decisions that are going to directly impact the team or an individual athlete, I'll talk to the coach about those decisions and say, hey, this is what we've got to decide. Here are the pros, here are the cons. What do you think? And we'll make a collective decision around that. There are some things where they'll go, I don't want to know about that. Just do it. And other things with the day-to-day functioning of the team, then that's their responsibility. So it's like to set up with them a very clear, I suppose, role and role responsibilities. Like, where does my role sit? What is it?
Right.
And where's the overlap? And then where does their role sit? And making sure that in the overlap, we're talking lots and communicating lots. So, as I said, we'll talk casually through the week, and we'll have a set weekly meeting where we get together and we've got an agenda we go through to tick off bits and pieces. That might be what's happening this week or next week. It might be some long-term planning stuff. Okay, well, we now know where we're going to be playing leading into the Paris Olympics. So let's start thinking about, our planning for trips and tours and all those sort of things, or selection concerns or player concerns, or, how we're going to manage all those things. So, and then there'll be some things that are, random ones where they'll be asking for support on, we've got to, this is a challenge we've got with a particular player. What do you think? How should we manage it? Who's going to have the conversation? So, there's that there where it's, we collectively make the decisions on those things together, which is it's really important because you need to be aligned, and you can have robust discussion, you can have disagreement behind closed doors, but ultimately once you go out to face either the staff group or the playing group, there has to be alignment between, what the decision is and owning that.
Yeah. What's your opinion on kind of like high performance centers? It sounds like the men, especially, and maybe partly the women, have kind of a high performance situation where they're training together, living together, and that sort of thing. Almost like an Australian Institute of Sport back in the day for swimming, where you had a group of coaches and the best swimmers coming down, and they're all living together and they're all working together. So, in your personal opinion, as a high performance director, do you come in and say, this is the best setup, or do you try and disband that and say, I think it's better if they all work individually and then come together at a certain point? I mean, what's your personal opinion on that?
Oh, I think for a team sport, the best teams train together.
Right.
So I think it's important. Like you think about all like any team competition, that the teams will train together and prepare together. So I think it's important that the teams have an opportunity to train together. The coaches get a chance to work through the physical prep and then the technical and the tactical prep for the team, so there's that preparation leading into the competition. So I think for hockey, for field hockey, the best setup and the best structure, and the players believe in this as well, is that they spend a large period of time together training, preparing for their major tournaments. Other sports, I think, with swimming, for example, I think it's a more nuanced discussion, I think, because if you want to be able to support the athletes with the right support services, then you really need to have an environment where those things can be set up and structured and easy to access and ready to go, because they're not as mobile as they might have been previously, because they're far better technology-wise. So,
Right.
So maybe it's a case of having a central point where all that programs can come to utilize. So that's sort of not, you are encouraging, it might be a program that's running there, but you want to make the difference is that you've got to have the right fit for that individual athlete and their discipline and the coach that's working with them. and the right environment around them. So it's not as easy in an individual sport like swimming to say, well, we'll just get everyone together and they'll all train there and it'll all be fine, because there are other elements that play into it. But if you're going to be able to deliver a true high performance environment around an athlete, it's very difficult to see how you could do that in a 25 meter, 1.5 meter deep pool with no other support around you. You know what I mean? So.
I mean, I guess where I'm coming from is part of my criticism of the US system is it hasn't evolved from this idea of, you go through college and then there's no real professional system set up, so it's like, well, maybe I'll just hang around to college and hope for the best kind of thing situation. So you have these, out of college athletes, overaged athletes that want to have careers, that want to maybe even start a family and things like that and have sponsors, but then they're having to get stuck in these collegiate programs where there's no real professional setting. It's like, well, this is what we do for the college and this is what I get paid for. So if you want to be part of that, you can do that. And so there's never been this real progression in the US system of going into these professional settings. And again, I don't know what the best system is necessarily. And I think it would be difficult, right? Like obviously there's funding that comes into this. So, when you're talking about the hockey team, it's like, well, if you're going to bring everybody together from all around the country into one centralized situation, then you got to understand that these guys and girls are going to have families and they're going to have whatever it is, but there's also got to be the support network to be able to sustain that, to say, yeah, I can live here and I can thrive in this environment. So in terms of the funding, where does that come from?
So we're like all Olympic sports in Australia, primarily funded through the AIS. So we get our AIS funding allocations. We provide a small living allowance to the athletes through that.
So when you say AIS, I just want to clarify for those international people
Australian Institute of Sport.
Australian Institute of Sport.
Yeah. So
that's funded by the federal government.
Yeah. So that's from the federal government. It comes down through the main funding body is the Australian Sports Commission, and they look after participations and also high performance sport in Australia. And the high performance sport arm is the Australian Institute of Sport. And they now, which is different to when you were swimming, Brett, they don't run programs anymore, the AIS. They fund sports to run programs. So they provide funding to hockey, and we run our program strategically as we think is best for the sport. But we are very cognizant of making sure that athletes are thriving in their environment and are able to then come to training and commit and do what they need to do at training, because they're not worried about day to day or what's happening with employment or whatever. And so encouraging them we structure training so they are able to work or study. We do have some athletes who are working almost full time in their respective careers. And doing very, very well in those as well. So obviously got super supportive employers, and we work closely with them to maintain that relationship, not just between the athlete and the employer, but between us and the employer as well, in terms of needing time to travel and do what needs to be done. But it's difficult. It's hard. I mean, as I said before, we had a significant cut in our funding for our women's program. 40% of the funding for the women's program was taken off the women, which has meant we need to change the program away from being centralised, which means we change the amount of that we can support the athletes with directly, which means some players have made the choice to go, well, I can't stay here. It's not sustainable. I have to go home.
Right.
And I need to be with, back with my family essentially to be able to afford to live and train. So, the funding one's a real challenging one. But, I think back to your original point about the US, that's always been an observation of mine, is that you have the US has such a really good pathway up until college. Yeah. And then from there, it just becomes a bit of a nebulous, I suppose. It doesn't really know what's happening. So, that's where I think a couple of really targeted high performance centres, what maybe they're super clubs or whatever the structure might be, that provides the opportunity for athletes who are, like I say, over age or ready to go, can move there to a major location. You can have all the support structures and systems around them that you need. And they also have the opportunity to find careers and work and do what they need to do. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously there's a how you're going to resource that is the big question.
Yeah. I get this question a lot in terms of, the Americans asking me, basically back in Australia, like, what are the top sports? So in terms of like the hierarchy of sports in Australia right now, where would you position certain sports in terms of the top 3, top 5 type sports?
Well, I mean, I think cricket's always been, a spiritually popular game in Australia. So I think certainly during the summertime, that's up there. I think from a national perspective during the wintertime, and particularly in Melbourne during summer as well, then AFL, Australian rules football, which is our home game, is super popular, and there's a lot of discussion, a lot of talk about that. The season, it's a national game now. There's teams in Queensland, there's teams in Sydney, New South Wales, Victoria, obviously, South Australia, West Australia. So it's a truly national competition. So it would be, the sort of sport that dominates the landscape from March through to September,
Right.
Nationally, and then certainly during summer in different pockets, you still get people talking about what's going on with pre-season draft, with recruitment, so forth. So
Yeah.
AFL would be up there, and then rugby league's obviously another super popular sport as well on the eastern seaboard, Queensland, New South Wales, and to a lesser extent in Melbourne. So I think they would be, from my perspective, the 3 most popular ones. And I think cricket's done a really good job with women's cricket, and they were probably the leaders in bringing that to the forefront and providing opportunities for the female cricket team, and then also ramping up the support to the group and their opportunities to be truly professional. And the AFL are catching up now with that, and women's rugby league now, I know, is also making big leaps and bounds in allowing the female side of the sport to flourish and to be truly professional as well, which is great to see.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, I appreciate this. Look, it is primarily a swimming podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
I love talking to different people, but in terms of the landscape, then where swimming is now, like, I get this question a lot too. Is like, back in the early 2000s was almost like this, this glory, this golden period of the golden swimming type of thing, where you had the Ian Thorpes and Kieran Perkins and Grant Hackett's and those sorts of people, where Susie O'Neill's and Petria Thomas, and so you had these superstars. But like, in terms of swimming and back home in Australia, I haven't been home in like 15 years. So it's like, where is it now? Where is swimming?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question, Brett. And I was just talking yesterday with the head coach of Rowan Taylor's the head coach now. I was chatting with him yesterday, and just saying to him, mate, swimming don't have any sponsors. I know. So it's really, and look, it's incredibly complex, and I don't, I'm an outside observer now as well, so I don't want to be overly critical of swimming per se, but I find it difficult to understand off the back of the performances they had in Tokyo, which were amazing. They did a wonderful job. The athletes performed out of the box, really, didn't they, in terms of their medal performances and the overall team performance.
Yeah.
Relays, the whole bit, it was really, really good. How they haven't managed to leverage that to a greater perspective for the betterment of the sport, I'm not really clear on, because, I reflect back on those days. It used to be that, for your American listeners, we had a Saturday night show called Hey Hey It's Saturday, which was massive, like Tonight Lifestyle sort of thing, and they would cut to the 1500 meter freestyle final in the middle of that show, just to watch Kieran, and then Hawke swim the 1500 meter final at our national championships. Nationals are broadcast on live TV, so I feel like the sport has the opportunity to get back there. I just think it's the moment it's trying to find its relevance, I suppose, and where it sits in the landscape. And I still have a real connection to swimming and want the best for it. So I want it to get back to that level of awareness and popularity in the market, because I think it can get back there. And I think they have the talent at the moment, certainly in terms of the individual athletes, but the team performance as well, to leverage that.
That's actually a good point that you bring up, and being somebody that's in hockey and field hockey, it's not, at the forefront, let's say, of the number one sport in Australia or number one sport in the world. So in terms of like building brand and someone who's a high performance manager, how do you assist and facilitate the athletes to build brand within field hockey?
Yeah, so look, that's a really good question, because we're trying to do that here. There's been different times where the two respective teams, the women's team is the Hockeyroos, the men's team is the Kookaburras. They have been really recognisable team brands in Australia, and certainly 2000, when the Hockeyroos won in Sydney, was that time. They were sponsored by Telstra, as swimming was. They were really big in the marketplace, and the Kookaburras won in 2004. So there's been times where they've been really present in the marketplace. So the opportunity now is to try and do that, and that's about having matches home here in Australia, but also being the athletes they're of the demographic that are super invested in and understand social media and their reach through that platform. So facilitating them to find the appropriate way to do that through the team environment. So working with the commercial team within Hockey Australia to basically have someone telling our story is what we want to do. So it's not just about, well, we go to this competition and play. It's about, well, what happens through the preparations. And we've seen the power of that sort of storytelling through, Drive to Survive on Netflix, or people are really interested in what happens, not just at competition day, but what happens behind the scenes. So how do we tell the story of the group, but tell the story of individuals within that group as well, to connect with a wider audience? And that's what we're really trying to do. And I'm not on social media. I don't really, it's not for me, but I understand the power of it for leveraging brand and what the team need to do. So my role is to facilitate the correct way to do that and support the athletes to engage in it the way they want to, and to have the right staff around that connect with the team and can do that. Yeah,
awesome. Well, I'm going to talk with you offline. I work in tech company now. I work for an app called Any Question, and we're all about building brand and connection to great athletes. So I'm gonna talk with you offline about this. But we'll get hockey up on the platform. That'd be cool. But listen, man, it's been great to catch up and do this. It's been fun, man. It's been too long. All right.
Yeah. Thanks, Hawke.
Yeah. All right, mate. Take care. Hey, good luck with everything.
Thank you.
See ya.